All right. Hey, Chad, it's great to have you here, man. So honored to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Hey, no problem. So, I wanted to, when I heard that I could get you on the show, I was so pumped because of the state of the world today. But for people who don't know you, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, so currently I work as a founder of Mighty Oaks Foundation, and I also work as the chairman of the Faith-Based Veteran Service Alliance, which is a coalition that works with the White House, Congress, DoD, and the Veterans Administration. So those are two roles I work in. Currently, I am also just became a veterans surrogate speaker for the Trump campaign to speak about really veterans policy and why it's very important. And President Trump remains in office, not because of any particular candidate, but because of the policy the administration has pushed forward. All that started with really my own story of being a veteran. I'm from a three-generation Marine Corps family. My father was a Marine infantryman in Vietnam, and definitely struggled his whole life with post-traumatic stress disorder until he died at the young age of 63. I served as a Force Reconnaissance Marine and as part of JSOC task force with some of your NSW brothers, and I did 8 deployments with working with NSW on a JSOC task force. And then my son Hunter is a third-generation Marine. He served as an Anglo Marine and embedded with the Georgians and went to Afghanistan. So even though I did eight deployments to Afghanistan, my hardest one, I say, is my 9th deployment to Afghanistan, sending my son there.
Oh man, I can only imagine. My kids are still very young, so I haven't had to worry about that yet. But holy smokes,
not a good experience. So that's kind of my military background. Outside of the military, I was a police officer for 4 years while I was going to college and serving in the reserves. And then in addition to that, I was in martial arts my whole life. So I was a professional mixed martial arts fighter. Won a world title, amassed 18-2 professional record. So I use that platform a lot for the work that I do when I first started doing the work to do with veterans.
yeah, I knew all. I thought I knew a lot about you, and then doing some homework on you and watching your videos on your website, which is fantastic, by the way. I didn't, learning about your law enforcement background was, you had a really trying experience in your first 4 years, it sounds like. And, I don't know if you want to talk about that at all, but it was, amazing story. If you want to go into it, very powerful.
Yeah, I was, I'd already did 4 years on active duty. I was, went in the Marine Corps. I wanted to be a reconnaissance Marine. So I went in the Marine Corps at a young age of 17 years old. Made it my first year in the recon community. And, I went in 1993 and
Right.
it's peacetime. I imagine you went in there in peacetime.
Yeah, 1992.
Yeah. So, I mean, the military is a lot different at that time. It wasn't like we were getting an opportunity to deploy. And so I figured I'd take 4 years off, switch to the reserves and get a degree and come back in as an officer. But I was married and had a son at the time, so I had to work. And so my job, what I'm most qualified for, being a Marine, was a police officer. So I was a police officer in New Orleans and came out of the academy, worked undercover narcotics right out of the police academy. And then after that stint of doing that, I went back to where you're supposed to start in patrol. Right. And while I was on patrol, I was just a normal night. I remember eating dinner, and I took a break with my wife, and heard my buddy come over the radio. He was also a former Marine named Steve, and when I heard him come over the radio, this guy, real composed guy. He was actually one of my field training officers, so I really looked up to him. And I heard in his voice, like, you could hear in somebody's voice when something's really wrong, and he was calling for backup, and the radio system actually went off, kind of Murphy's Law, right? The radio system went off, shut off at the time he needed people most. And I just knew I needed to get there. So I was like speeding there and got to the house where he was at. It was an elevated modular home. And I seen about 30 people standing outside, and he's arguing with this lady on the porch. And then as I go up on the porch, he tells me to handle this lady, and that her husband had just barricaded himself in the back bedroom with a rifle. And so I remember him telling me that, and I tried to deal with this lady, and she was trying to get into the house, and I physically tried to force her back, and she started being combative, and I actually pushed her over the rail, and a bunch of the people, the pedestrians that were outside, actually grabbed her and helped pull her over and contain her. Her and her children were outside in that crowd, and this guy was in the back, And in the back bedroom, my partner Steve went to the bedroom and really covered a window to make sure he didn't start shooting out the window. And then he came into the living room and he was wanting to get out of the house to get to his wife. And I was in the way. I remember when he came in the hallway, it was like I was standing in the front doorway and he was cat a corner across from me, and there was a mirror so I could see him in the mirror. And he was leaning against the wall in the hallway and he had his rifle and I could see him like press checking, like looking in the chamber to see if it was loaded.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I'd been to the guy's house before. I knew who he was. And so it's
History of domestics or,
history of domestic violence and
yeah.
he's always fighting and stuff. So I yelled at him by name. Russell was his name. And I told him, hey, don't come out with that gun. Like, put the gun down, come out, talk about it. We can work this out, but do not come out with the gun. And he started yelling for us to leave, that he wanted to talk to his wife. And then he came around the corner, and when he came around the corner, he actually had the gun in kind of an awkward fashion. He had, instead of having it like shouldered, he had it over his shoulder. But he had his hand next on the receiver. His finger was next to the trigger. It was could have very vivid like memories of the visualization of seeing where his finger was not in the trigger well, but his finger was by the trigger. And he was pointing it at me and he was yelling at me to leave. And, if you know anything about use of force, that's like justified lethal force. Like I could have shot him at that time. And if you'd asked me that morning, like hey, somebody comes out and points a gun at you, are you going to shoot them? And you're like, yeah, heck yeah, I'm going to shoot them. I'm going to defend myself. But for some reason, I still felt like I had control. And I knew this guy was like mad. He's dealing with his wife. I remember like I'm assessing the house. Like his kids' toys are on the floor. His family pictures. His wife and kids are right behind me. And I'm like yelling at him. Like I wasn't yelling at him like a policeman anymore. I'm like, I'm going to freaking kill you. Like, put down your gun. I'm going to kill you. And he's like, you put down your gun. And so we're in this verbal altercation. And as he's talking, I started closing the distance towards him. And he's a really big guy. I know later on that he was 6'3", 263 pounds. He's a big guy. I'm 5'3".
Yeah, I was going to say you're a pretty short guy, but powerful. Yep.
I was about 130 pounds. I don't know how powerful I was at the time, but I've trained martial arts my whole life, and I was even a professional fighter at this time. So I had confidence to defend myself, and being a recon Marine, I have confidence, not just a police officer. I had confidence in handling a firearm, and I just felt still in control. And so I just took off towards him, and I grabbed the barrel of his gun and pushed it away from me. And I knew my partner was behind me somewhere, but as I pushed it away from me, I kicked him right in the nuts, like not like a football, like soccer kick, but I kicked him like a push kick.
Yeah.
The rifle out of his hand, and when I pulled, man, this guy's just a big guy, and nothing, it didn't come loose. And I kicked him a second time, pulled the second time. When I did, I was retaining my weapon, but my arm must have came away, and he grabbed my arm. So now he's like my gun hand with my pistol in my hand. I have his rifle, like. He's way bigger than me, and we're both fighting over two weapons. And
oh man,
I knew at that moment, like the situation, like really escalated bad. He was not going to give up, and he was never going to give up. He was fighting. It was a life or death fight at that point. And I turned my wrist and broke his grip, and I put my pistol right in the center of his chest, and I fired one round, and I got in a good position. I fired 5 more rounds, so I fired 6 rounds total. I didn't even really realize my partner was over my shoulder, but he fired 6 rounds over my shoulder. And we hit him, 11 out of 12 times, so all center mass, and so obviously it was a fatal thing. He spun away and he like was on his knees, and he turned around and he looked like right at me, like total calm conversation. He said you killed me, and then I pushed him down and pulled the rifle off from under him, and I remember like trying to handcuff him, and I heard him breathe like he exhaled, and like his life, felt his life leave his body. I'm handcuffing him, and his wrist was like blown out, and it was like a noodle. I think his arm might have been in front of him during one of the rounds, and really no blood was coming from the gunshot wounds in his body. It was mostly coming from his wrist, and somehow I had like blood all over my wrist and all over my hands because he was bleeding so much. And at that time, like every policeman in New Orleans, like from different departments, everything like rolled up and was there, and me and my partner were separated and interviewed, and I went home, and the next morning the chief told me, hey, don't read the newspaper. And of course I went read the newspaper, and the front page of the paper say cold-blooded murder.
Oh man.
Wife call shooting. And so I ended up going before getting investigated, going before a grand jury for a second-degree murder indictment, and which was very scary if anything about grand juries. And so I was cleared. And then later on, after that, the governor of Louisiana gave me and Steve the Medal of Valor for the state, and it's something I wasn't super happy about because I was very angry about the situation. One, angry that guy did that to me. I mean, I remember like right when the shots went off, like all the physiological effects that were happening, seeing
Yep.
everything slow down. I remember like hearing a gun like functioning and seeing at a Glock, seeing the casings come out the
Yep.
ejection port. And I could hear the light pops. I never heard a bang in my ear. Obviously, didn't have ear pro on. Never heard a loud
Right.
bang. The pops and then the clearest things I heard and all that was after he said you killed me, and I don't know the sequence of timing of it because my mind was so probably distorted from it. But hearing his wife, like the blood curdling scream of his wife, and actually wanting to go to her, like because I was there trying to protect her, like
Right.
wanting to go to her, and she was just screaming. And then when I looked out and saw people holding his kids, and looking around more at the family pictures and stuff like that, it was just a really terrible thing, and I was very angry at him making me do that to him, and two, and making me do that to him and his family, and two, I was angry with the way the police department handled it and the public handled it, and the media and all that stuff. So,
Yeah, well, I can empathize with you. I did, 16 years in the teams, and then I went on, lost my little brother to heroin and decided, hey, I'm done making third world countries safer. I think I'm going to go throw in with my, my little hometown PD, Boston PD. So I went on there, went to patrol for the minimum amount of time a year, went to the SWAT team. After that, did basically 4 years until my son was born with autism, and decided to do some different things just because you don't have a life when you're on the TAC team. And, because the Boston TAC team, they do SWAT stuff, but they're also moto cops. So they're doing all the dignitary escort, sports teams, all that stuff. And you wouldn't believe, I mean, yeah, you would. I mean, we would do 10 to 20 domestics a night. And, and that's what, one of the things that was pretty challenging for me is when I was a team guy, I was, everyone supported me. Everyone loved you and you're a team guy, or military, buy you drinks, all that stuff. When I was a cop, man, the only people who liked me were old people, and like really old people and really young kids. And then the rest just hated you because I volunteered to work the worst neighborhood in Boston, Roxbury. No one looked like me. It's 99.9% black there. And, it was just a really big difference that I felt like, no one, I knew at least in Boston, and then I actually did about a year of small town policing down south without a union. But at least in Boston, I know I had the union to protect me there because, the city will settle every time, as you know, they throw you under the bus and kind of, it is what it is. Luckily I had a really strong union in Boston, and they really, protected me, protect their people and represent you well and all that stuff, which was, incredible. But outside of that, man, it was just tough to grasp because, when you're overseas and you're deployed, okay, once I go beyond, leave post, everyone's a bad guy and treat everyone as a threat. But when you're a cop, particularly when you have to live in the city that you police, it never goes away. Right? I mean, you're going to the movies, you're there with your wife and your kid, and there's 10 gangbangers, and you put their friends away.
Yeah, it's 24/7. It doesn't turn off. You're looking over your shoulder, and it's I mean, we just had, I think it was just a few days ago, people followed police officers home, and was it Boston that people followed some police officers home?
Yeah, yeah.
Firebombed their cars. Was it Boston?
Yeah. I don't know. I know someone fired home. I remember reading the story. I don't know if it was firebombing their cars, but that sounds right.
Yeah.
And the thing was, I remember like on my day one of my shift, I was a different person. By the time I got to my fifth day on on my last tour, I had just kept all that baggage for the week, and you just become a different person towards the end of that. You're smoked, you're tired, you're going from call to call, picking up everyone else's baggage, and then you're taking that through. So, to pivot to what I wanted to talk about, with you, with all your experience with PTSD and how many people you talk to and your resilience training and all that, is what, I am worried for law enforcement, man. I mean, I already know they have a high suicide rate. I think, one, I'm worried for the profession that no one's going to want to do it. I know people are resign. I mean, I know at least 6 guys who already either retired early or resigned already.
60 in Minneapolis last week.
Yeah.
60, the whole TAC team, or special response unit, or whatever they call it there.
I mean, that's just,
Yeah,
I don't know how we're going to function.
That's not good for the public.
No, it's not. And the thing is that what people don't understand is the people that's going to hurt is the high crime area. One of the stats that no one really talks about is the amount of resources that those high crime areas take from a city, right? When you have 70% of the police department working one neighborhood or 2 or 3 neighborhoods, and then the rest are skeleton crews, And so, what do you guys, can you talk a little bit about Mighty Oaks? And then, of course, do you guys I know you're veteran focused. Do you guys take first responders?
Yeah, the answer is yes, we do.
Awesome.
I want to say something to what you said is like,
sure.
The level of hypocrisy. Like, I mean, these activists, and right now, by the way, they're no more protesting. They're not even activists. They're criminals.
No.
They're not even criminals. They're terrorists. Right
they're
now.
Terrorists. Yep.
They just occupied part of the United States.
Yeah, 6 blocks. They're.
I mean, a terrorist organization occupied 6 blocks of the United States, and whether people believe this or not, that warrants an actual military response.
Yep.
I would not be surprised, and people should not whine when they had a real military response and they realize what they did by actually being a terrorist group that's overtaking part of the United States. But I'll go back to answering your question. Yes, we do support first responders. Mighty Oaks came out of my own experience. I did those 8 deployments. I came home and I was diagnosed with PTSD, and had a 3-year battle with hopelessness, depression, anger, frustration. Ended with me almost divorcing my family, and at the very rock bottom, being in a closet with my pistol in my hand, trying to decide if I wanted to live or die. And my wife and some amazing people came into my life and helped to pull me out of that dark pit I was in, to show me the way forward. And of all the things that we did to help me, probably the biggest factor was the restoration with my faith, with my relationship with Christ. It really showed me that I had a future and I had a purpose moving forward if I would align my life with the life that I was actually created to live. And that revelation for me really lit a fire inside of me to not only maybe pay that forward with someone else, but really to spend the rest of my life sharing what I discovered with others, knowing that I wasn't the only one, knowing that 22 of veterans are taking the life every day, knowing that 80% of combat veteran divorce families were combat veteran families were divorcing, and knowing how many people were being diagnosed with PTSD and feeling hopeless, feeling depressed, feeling that there was no transition, no way forward, no purpose moving forward. And so I knew I had to share that. We found the Mighty Oaks Foundation. Over the years, the last 10 years, I've been able to do a lot of resiliency type events, which is going to prevent the problem, going to speak to active duty military bases around the world. NSW, I've done NSW resiliency conferences. I speak at Marine Corps boot camp every quarter. I go to bases all over the world, and I've spoken to about 150,000 active duty troops.
Awesome,
doing
man.
work, giving away about 100,000 of books that I've written. And then on the backside of that, we have a program called a legacy program. We do 30 of those a year. They're 1 week long intensives. They're not clinical. They're peer-to-peer. They're faith-based peer-to-peer mentoring programs from combat veterans who've been there and experienced those same things, who fell on their face but got back up again. We train them to pay it forward, just like I felt called to do. And we do, again, 30 of those camps a year for veterans who are out of the military, and for active duty who come on orders from all 4 branches of the military. Believe it or not, the military does send people on orders to us, even though we're a faith-based program. And we've had almost 4,000 graduates from that program, and just tremendous amount of success doing that. We have incredible aftercare partners with other organizations that we do aftercare and discipleship, for those that understand the Christian terms of discipleship. It's just really equipping other people to pay it forward.
Yep.
And then, and it's just been an incredible ride to do this over, again, 4,000 lives saved, families restored, legacies changed for eternity. And Congress has really took notice of the work that we were doing outside the government and the successes that we were having. And so I've been able to go testify before Congress, and then work with the President's Task Force at the White House. And I really got into understanding the legislation behind all this and what allows and doesn't allow faith-based programs to happen. So I really got tied helping to make sure that we have the right laws, legislations, policies in place to allow faith-based programming to serve our active duty troops in the DoD and the VA. If you look back historically, President Bush had signed an executive order to allow that to happen through Office of Faith and Opportunity Initiative. President Obama signed an executive order to take that away and push the VA to only clinical, no faith-based programs, no community programs.
Crazy.
Under the Obama administration. It was completely defunded and unstaffed. And then I had the opportunity in 2016 to sit with candidate Trump at the time, and right before the election, and I asked him, I had one question that was allowed to ask him, and that question was, if you become president of the United States, will you undo this? Will you allow faith-based programming to come back? Because I knew how critical it was to veterans care. Veterans deserve the choice to choose between clinical programs or faith programs or community programs or physical programs, or use the option of all of them. Veterans deserve that choice. They don't need to be told that you only have a clinical option. And two, I knew the impact that faith programs have for Christians and non-Christians. I knew the impact that they could have because I've seen it firsthand in my own life and the lives of thousands of other warriors. And President Trump, at the time, he answered me, yes, he would. And he actually came through with his promise and signed an executive order in 2018 to allow that to happen. And we're seeing the implementation of that now. And so that's why I was part of standing up the Faith-Based Veteran Service Alliance, which is a coalition of veterans, nonprofit organizations, VSOs, faith-based, to come together to be a voice in DC and to push for legislation and bills to be passed and make sure that policies implemented and really hold, I love and support this administration, but hold them accountable, hold the VA accountable, hold the DoD accountable, and make sure that the veterans are getting the best care they deserve, and help and being a resource to them too, not just being their rival, but being a resource to them. And so that's kind of the work that we've done. And along the way, it's a really long way to answer your question, but along the way, we discovered that veterans do not, as much as veterans may think they do, we do not have a monopoly on trauma. Everybody has been alive in this world has faced hardships and trauma. And I don't think anyone more, and being a veteran and being a combat veteran, I'll say I don't think anyone more than our law enforcement officers. Every single day they go out and they go to war on behalf of other people. And I was on an interview this morning with AVN, America's Voice News, and they asked me, is it because like veterans have that adrenaline in the military and they go to combat and they do all these cool jobs that they want to get out and become police officers because they get to do something cool again and do these tasks again, and it's task driven? I said, my answer is, I was kind of caught off guard by it. I didn't expect the guy to ask that question, but I think it's probably somewhat, but I think at its core, veterans at some point in their life, they made a decision to raise their hand at 17, 18, 20, 25 years old, however old they were, raise their hand and say, I want to do something important with my life. I want to serve other people who I don't even know around the world. And I want to be part of something bigger than myself. And it's something about those, that 0.5% of our population that serves our military in that way, that has a servant's heart to get out and serve other people and do something bigger than themselves. And when they get out of the military, it's a real easy transition to become a police officer and continue to serve that way. And I think there's a lot of motivating factors why someone would want to be a police officer coming out of the military. But I think at its core, that's probably the most common one. And even for those law enforcement officers who hadn't been in the military, I think one of the things they share in the military is that duty to serve others. I mean, who else in their right mind would want to be a police officer right now? They're being spit on. They're being told that they're criminals. They're being told that they're racist. And they're being told all these things. They're being things thrown, and their hands are tied behind their back by politicians. They can't do anything about it. They kiss their wife and kids goodbye, and their wife and kids, I've heard of families, wife and kids crying right now, just resign, quit, don't go. And they're going in and serving these communities anyway. It's insane that these guys would go and serve the communities that hate them, that are demonizing them, and put their lives on the line for these communities every day. There's no bigger example to me than a servant's heart than that. And I have no doubt that 99% of these police officers would put their lives on the line to save the lives of the very people who are attacking them right now.
Yeah.
And it is absolutely shameful, and even more shameful. It's disgusting that so many politicians, community leaders, business owners, media and television outlets, and pastors, even pastors of churches, are powering down to the social pressure and buying into this movement to defund police and demonize the police. It's disgusting, and I'm ashamed. There's pastors that I've been close to that I'm ashamed of them for being so weak and so cowardly to not stand up and say, this is wrong. This is what's true. Police officers respond to 400 million calls a year. And if they're going to respond to 400 million calls a year, yeah, every now and then someone's going to do something stupid and disgusting, like kill an innocent civilian, like what happened to George Floyd. And we should call it out, and that guy should be arrested, and he should lose his job, and he should go to jail. But we cannot group all the law enforcement officers together with that.
It's, I completely agree with you. It's the hardest job in America. Everyone who criticizes them should understand that they live in a zero mistake profession. I can't even imagine being overseas or in the military and having someone second guess every single thing I did. You know what I'm saying? I mean, every single thing I did. And I started seeing this towards the end when I got out. All right. So I was a cop 2008 to 2012, and cell phones, were evolving then, and, people were having them. But back then, Massachusetts used to be a 2 consent state. So no one could film you if they, whatever, you could take it, smash their phone or whatever. And, since then, it has gotten so much worse. Like, I remember when I got out, I went and I did executive protection for a bit because, like I said, my son had autism, and I stepped away to throw everything I could at that. And, I watched Ferguson go down. I was actually on BPD when the Obama administration and that Cambridge police officer arrested the professor there because he wouldn't show him an ID breaking into his house. And he's like, hey, I just need you to show here. And Obama came out and said, hey, it's obvious. I don't know all the facts, but the Cambridge Police Department behaved stupidly. From that moment on, our job became harder, right? And when I left, my friends were telling me after Ferguson that they weren't even doing proactive police work anymore. They were just locked down like they're doing now. They're locking down, and they all sit in their parking lot, and they're only responding to calls for service. You know how much crime and how much suffering that's going to lead to? It's just unbelievable how much our population is going to suffer because of that. And it's not Beverly Hills that's going to suffer. It's going to be the communities that actually need it, who happen to be the ones where all this is going on,
Right.
So one of the questions I wanted to get into that you were talking about with your journey. I know in your video you said that you were kind of a Christian before or whatever, but like when did you realize that, you're like all of us, you're a alpha male, you're on your own, and one of the unique things of your story is you didn't throw yourself into a substance. You threw yourself into sport or passions, which a lot of people wouldn't consider that a detriment, right? But, and you were so unique in that fashion because everyone else I know throws themselves into women, drugs, or booze, right? And you just said, hey, I'm going to go 1000% into martial arts or whatever the next thing was, right? So when did you realize that was what you were doing, right? And what was the thing that let you know that you couldn't do this on your own?
Well, I think that's probably in my personality as well. Like throwing myself at productive things that seem productive. But I was on an interview a few years ago, and the guy he read my whole bio. And my bio used to be longer. I'd when I first wrote my bio, included everything that ever did, he's reading my bio, and why is he reading my bio when on an interview like we are now? And I actually want to climb under their table. I just felt I don't know why, it made me feel so embarrassed that he's reading all these things. And he's like, man, that's such an impressive resume. How's that make you feel? And I'm like, honestly, the honest answer, it makes me feel like a completely discontent person. And I think there was this hole that was inside of me my whole life that felt like no goal was ever achieved. I wanted to be a Marine at 17 years old. I became a Marine, and I had to be a recon Marine. Then I'm like, okay, I got to go to force. I got to be a force recon Marine. I got to go to this school and that school and this school and that school. The goals never stopped coming. Every time I accomplished something, I had to move on to the next thing. And I want to go, there's a slot at JSOC. I could go try out for JSOC task force. I could go on there. The next deployment, the next crazy operation, what can I get on? Me. I want to be on the next thing. It was just never fulfilled. And then all of a sudden in one day, I'm just constantly building my ego. And then one day my ego is just taken away when I'm diagnosed with PTSD. I'm read out of my program. I have my TSSCI clearance. I'm read out of my program, told I can't do my job anymore.
Holy smokes.
The command that you probably could assume that I was at, was like the pinnacle of my career that could ever possibly. I never fathomed I could be there and be in the type of operations I was. So my ego was completely crushed. I was completely ashamed because I felt like I failed all my peers in my mission. I felt like I failed everyone. And on top of that, my level of anxiety and PTSD was so high. Like that level of panic attacks I was having, the only way I know how to describe it was like, maybe like if you're on top of a burning building, like the World Trade Center's buildings, and you jump because not because you want to jump, because it's just so, you feel like there's nothing else you could do. It's the only way to escape. I mean, I've described it like this: like if your ankle was handcuffed to the drain of the bottom of a pool and you're drowning and you can see air, like how desperate would you be while you're drowning to get one breath of air, but you never die? You like live in that state of panic 24/7, feeling like you're physiologically going to die. Like that's where I was at. I was ashamed. I felt like I failed. My ego and identity was totally tied to this job and this career. And so the only way I knew how to solve that, I need to dive into something. I need to accomplish something and rebuild my ego. That was the only way I knew how to. And so destructive things, what didn't appeal to me, like drinking, drugs, like women, like all those things didn't appeal to me. I need to rebuild my ego. I need to be important again. I need to have a task again. I need to accomplish something again. So just like someone would climb in a bottle of alcohol, I got on those wrestling mats and started training as much as I could. And I was already undefeated as a professional fighter at the time because I was fighting on the side of the military. But I just immersed myself into that and took every fight I could and trained my butt off. And I ended up being 18-2. I won a lot of fights. I was ranked number 6 as a number 6 flyweight in the world. I won a world title belt. Fought all the big shows and everything. But still, every accomplishment I had prior to that in the military, every accomplishment I had in winning fights, that hole was still there. It was still empty, and it was like it wasn't enough accolades I could pour into it. There wasn't enough success I could find to fill it. It just never got filled. So I kept chasing and kept chasing. And meanwhile, I'm still dealing with the panic attacks. I'm still dealing with the anger. I'm being a tyrant in my home, like yelling at my wife and children, throwing things, breaking things, just acting like a maniac. And then the relationship between my wife and I became so distant and apart that then the women came because there was a lot of attention from being at sports. So I ended up in an affair, and me and my wife sat down and we decided we were going to divorce, and we found ourselves in 2 separate apartments and sold our home, and we faced him for divorce. And I just says at that rock bottom point, and I just said, man, I like an epiphany hit me. Like all these people that I blamed for everything and all these things I tried to accomplish was absolutely going nowhere. And I felt like, I'm the problem. Like I'm the common denominator in all these people's lives, and I'm hurting a lot of people. And I didn't want to really kill myself at that time. I probably wanted to die. Like I was like, it'd be better off if I was dead for everyone. But I didn't want to kill myself at the time. But I just came to this conclusion that my family would be sad without me, but they would be better off without me. And I believe that same hopeless thought finds a home in the hearts of 22 veterans every single day. Like maybe my family would be sad without me, but they're going to be better off without me. And I really believe that. I remember I would sit my family's pictures down in front of me on the floor of my closet, and I had a Glock 22 pistol, and I would literally like try to build up the courage. You and I know like what happens when that trigger breaks. Like we know what that gun's going to do. It's like, I mean, very familiar with firearms, seeing what firearms do. And I remember like trying to build the courage to actually break that trigger threshold. But every single time that I put that gun to my head, I would this thought would come over my head, like, who's going to find me? Like the aftermath. I've been a police officer, like, who's going to find me? How's this going to play out? And then I would think, oh, the only other person that had a key to my apartment was my oldest son, Hunter. And that was like, I can't, like, he's either going to let someone in or he's going to come in and find me because they're going to be looking for me. Like, and so that thought would be enough to let me pump the brakes. But then by the next day, I was back there again. And so I was really battling this. And this one morning, my wife and I got on a phone call. We got this argument. And because of something I said, she felt I was kind of in distress. So she came over. And when she came over, I was in that closet in that moment, trying to build up that courage. And she banged on the door. I wasn't going to answer her because I didn't know who it was. But when she announced herself and I heard her voice, it was like a little kid getting caught doing something wrong. I took that pistol and I hid it under a blanket in my apartment, in my closet, a place she would never went. She would have never went to see that, but I actually hid it. And I was like, I don't know why I did it today other than probably just being ashamed of what I was doing. But I answered the door and we got in this really heated argument. In the middle of that argument, she asked me a question that radically changed my life. She asked me how I could do everything I did in the Marine Corps. We were dating when I went to BRC, which is like you guys' buds, basic recon course. So she saw me become a recon Marine. She saw me do all these deployment workups and training and go to crazy schools and all this crazy stuff I did in the military. She saw me doing stuff with the fights, like cutting weight for fights. I'd lose like 35 pounds, look like a Holocaust victim, like bones in my face. Like the amount of discipline it took to do all those things. She saw all of that and she's like, how could you do all of that? And when it comes to your family, you'll quit. And, I don't know about you, man, but like there's no more soul cutting word to me than to be called a quitter. And, and she like really called me out on it. And she was right. I'd been successful at a lot of professional things that I pursued in my own ambition to feel my ego or feel important or do cool things and do things that, I felt were serving others. They weren't all selfish, but I was successful at those things. When it came to the most important things, like being a husband, being a father, being a young 17-year-old kid, like for me, that when I joined the Marine Corps and raised my hand, it was a second chance at life because I grew up under a very broken father who suffered from PTSD.
And that was what I was going to ask you, how was, your father, how was your like my dad was 18 when he had me and my mom was 16 and that didn't last. And he was off and became an alcoholic and a felon and like 5th generation alcoholic, whatever. So I didn't really have a role model. And so I was going to ask you, what was your upbringing like?
Well, my dad joined the Marine Corps too. He pretty much joined the Marine Corps as a suicide attempt. He joined in the height of Vietnam, and the Marine Corps didn't draft, so he enlisted in the Marine Corps to be infantryman. He was driving to high school senior year, goofing off with his best friend in the car, and he hit the back of a garbage truck. And his childhood best friend died, and within that week, he went to the Marine Corps recruiter and enlisted as 0311 rifleman to go to Vietnam. So I don't think his time in the military even started good, and then he went, served his 3 years. I think back then he only did 3 years. Did Vietnam, and he never recovered until the day he died. And on his deathbed, invalid, I finally got to, forgive him for childhood of. When I say child abuse, violent physical child abuse, and abandonment and all those things that we faced. I got to forgive him and love on him and even pray with him, and I believe lead him into a relationship with Christ. And on his deathbed in an invalid time. And he had damaged his life so much that I could not even have a funeral for him because he didn't have one brother or sister or any family member that even would take the time to attend the funeral. So I couldn't even have a funeral for him. It had been just me. And so, his life was destroyed because he never got the help he needed coming home. And, we had me and my brother. I had a brother who's a year older than me. We had just had a terrible childhood under that that harshness. Mm-hmm. And actually, my brother and I, we were 13 and 14 years old when we seen the movie Navy SEALs, and we were like, we're gonna join the military. We're gonna be some type of special operations, but we didn't want to be in the Navy. Sorry,
I didn't either.
But we were like, we want to be in some type of special operations. So we grew up in Southern Louisiana. We loved the water, and we actually started watching these you probably seen that real cool Navy SEAL video where they're in Coronado. It's like in the 90s. We were watching that, and they were teaching how to do all kind of stuff. We started running and swimming and preparing ourselves to be in the military. And the reason we decided we wanted to be in the Marine Corps because the only thing my dad was ever proud of in his life, the only thing that he ever lit up about because he was so depressed and so angry, was the fact that he was the United States Marine. And because of that, we were like, well, there's got to be something good there. And it's the one bright light in all this darkness. And so we chose to do that. And about a year into that process with me and my brother, he was shot and he was killed. And so when I say I joined the Marine Corps out of it was a second chance of life for me, it really was because from the age of 14 to 17 when I joined, I was in a very dark and deep depression. What I had left of family was decimated because of the death of my brother, and I was living on my own at 15 years old. So the Marine Corps was like second chance of life for me.
So no mother around or anything like that?
What's that?
Your mom, did you have a mother around, any mother figure or anything like that?
Yeah, it was my half brother. So my stepmom, at that time, it was our only biological son. She completely lost her mind. My biological mom was married to another man that was just extremely abusive, and they didn't want anything to do with me at the time. So I just me and my older sister just lived in a house that my dad had bought, and my dad took off overseas to do contracting work overseas. So between 14 when I'm 14 years old and my brother was killed till when I went to Marine Corps at 17. I was pretty much just taking care of myself. I was doing construction work. I was roofing and putting shingles on roofs of houses and
in Louisiana.
Louisiana, yeah. So that's I didn't realize that was my training for BRC.
Yeah.
Jump back and carry all those packs, run up and down Coronado Beach with a pack full of sandbags.
Yeah. Oh man, I mean that's it's so many of us have that wound of abandonment, and that's the hole that we have in us that we try to pour into whatever it is, our drug of choice, right? Whether it's a sport or alcohol or women or drugs or whatever it is, it seems to be that, I think John Eldridge writes a lot on that subject, in Wild at Heart.
Yeah.
And I found that to be really illuminating for me. And that's what I was able to identify when I went through ORW. So you have this, really tough upbringing. You go in the military, in your testimonial, I remember you saying, yeah, you were a Christian, but you weren't really a Christian. You were a Christian only in name, if I'm getting that right. So when, like I said, in the beginning of this, did you realize that you couldn't do it alone and that you needed your Lord and Savior?
Well, when Kathy gave me that question, that challenge, and said, how can you do all this when it comes to your family? When it comes to your family, you'll quit. Like that really prompted me to, because she was right, and it prompted me to make a decision. And that decision was to get back in the fight. And what that looked like to me had nothing to do with faith. It looked like, okay, I've been successful professionally because of work ethic, character, discipline, all those things. And if I could just do those things in my personal life, I'm going to fix everything.
Yeah.
And but the one thing I did know, and I believe this was, just God orchestrated. I knew that I couldn't do it alone, and I knew I couldn't do it with the people I surrounded myself by, because I surrounded myself by people that told me everything I wanted to hear and not what I needed to hear. And that's really easy to do when you're having a big gym and you're fighting MMA and then have like kind of a lot of attention around you. It's really easy to do.
Yeah, you're a big shot.
Yeah, so that's what I did. I just leveraged that. So what I did was I asked my wife, was there someone at this church she was going to that could help hold me accountable, because she was going to this amazing church and she was praying for me. And so she introduced me to this man named Steve Toth. And Steve had never served in the military. He wasn't a recon marine or anything. In fact, Steve's only job was really meeting me and then introduced me to a retired SEAL named Mike Charbonnet. I think Mike might have been a corpsman too, but he was going to introduce me to Mike. But I actually never ended up meeting Mike, because I met this guy Steve and just totally fell in love with him because of his just candidness with me. I had literally written a 5-paragraph order, like operational order, of how I was going to fix my life, and I really wanted to show it to this guy Steve because I wanted to show my wife and really earn some points with her. But when I sat down with him at the Starbucks coffee shop, I put it on a table and showed it to him. He didn't even read it, and I remember like being really offended, like I put all this work in this, you didn't even looking at it, and he slid it back over to me and told me I was going to fail. And he said, if this thing doesn't have anything to do with your relationship with God, I'm not going to waste your time, and I'm not going to let you waste mine. And I remember just like his like how serious he was when he said that.
Yeah.
And I really, in that moment, I really just it was almost like I look back and I'm like, time probably stood still for me in that moment, because I look back and I had tried everything. I had tried the clinical programs, the VA. I had tried all different other kind of like counseling programs, and I've been on the medication. I tried, and then I tried professional success and had the highest level of professional success, made a lot of money, and had a lot of attention and all these things. And none of those things had changed anything in my life. And we have a saying at Mighty Oaks that we say now is, if what you're doing isn't working, then why not try something different? Right? Everything I tried didn't work. Why not try something different? Why not give God a chance? So when I decided to make the decision to give God a chance, it was because there was nothing else. It was the last option. And I think a lot of people end up there where it's like, I tried everything else. Why not give God a chance? What do I have to lose? That's really where I was at. And so I did. I trusted this man, Steve, and I surrendered my life to Christ. And after the decision, my life was radically changed. And the way I believe it was radically changed was, one, was my perspective was changed. Before, when I felt in control of my life and not God being in control of my life, I looked at the world a lot differently. I looked at my incidents in my life, really bad incidents. My childhood, losing my brother. Foster Harrington and I served 10 years together. One of my best friends, we served in every unit together, including the reserve unit. And then we deployed, first deployment, he was killed. Like some terrible stuff that had happened to me, losing a lot of friends and stuff like that. I looked at all these things and realized that those things had really defined me before. And I came to this realization with God in control of my life, that as bad as those things may have been in my life, I didn't end up with a pistol in my hand in the closet because of those things. I ended up in that position because of choices I made in response to those things. And I never had lost the ability to choose differently moving forward. And God had always kept me, giving me that freedom to choose my circumstances, the power of choice to move forward. As cliche as it might sound, I realized I didn't have to let my past define my future. I could choose a different future moving forward, and I did. And not only did I choose a different future moving forward, but now this guy Steve's mentoring me with a biblical blueprint of how to live my life moving forward. And that brought me to applying the intentional application of those things in my life, led me to restoration in my brokenness in my marriage, led me to hope for the first time, and ultimately led me to what I think we all seek in our life, and that's purpose moving forward. And that purpose manifested in sharing what I discovered with other people through the work that we do at Mighty Oaks.
Right. One, your wife is an incredible woman. I've never met her, don't know anything, but just from your story, for her to be strong enough to be able to forgive you and to fight for you, absolutely incredible. Two, it's surprising that you had the humility in that moment that Steve kind of threw your work back in your face and challenged you. I mean, a lot of us would have been like, who the hell is this dude? Do you know why that was? I mean, was that God doing that? Or, something must have gone off in you to be like, who the frick is this guy right now? To just,
well, that was my reaction though. So I always say, Steve, while Steve wasn't an MMA fighter or he wasn't a special operations guy or in the military, like the gift that he has to help me was he has ADD, like really bad. Like the guy has like no patience at all. If he's walking, like we go eat lunch and he'll run to his car from the parking lot because walking is like a waste of time. Like he's really, and the reason that was such a gift for me, because I was so manipulative. Like I would have said all the right things. I would have used him to manipulate earning my wife back. And he just didn't have the patience to do it. And so when I like put all this together, I'm like slid this paper over and we slid it back. I remember being like really like pissed off because I'm like, dude, I'm giving you my time. That was my idea. Like I'm giving you my time and I did all this work. You're not even have any respect for this. Like it's just totally backwards thinking, right? Like he's giving me his time. And, but that's how my mindset was. And it was just, I felt like so called out, and normally I would have fought back with that, but at that time I was just I just knew there was a humility that was over me because I had tried everything at my own will, and all it resulted in was brokenness in myself and brokenness in other people, and just my life was in shambles. And so while I wanted to keep control, I knew that I had lost control and I needed help, and I needed to trust somebody.
Well, praise God at that. And
it was his candidness that won me over.
Yeah. I mean, especially when you've surrounded yourself with yes men, you're a big shot and you're like, do you know who the heck I am? And you're going to just throw I mean, that's just awesome. That's God at work. So you decide to give God a chance. Does he start opening doors? Like, how does it start working for you? How does your life start changing? Because I mean, you come up with this program, you've built a very successful program. Stuff must have happened for you to systematize it, right?
Well, I'm pretty radical, dude. Like, I'm really
radical.
So, yeah. So I can't do anything halfway, and it's to a fault. Yep. So when I decided to do this, and by the way, I know you're a fan of John Eldridge. In this process of Steve mentoring me, I went to John Eldridge Wild at Heart boot camp. And awesome. while I was there, I was on one of his isolation walks. Mm-hmm. I had this epiphany. I really felt God just made it clear to me that I needed to walk away from everything I was doing and like completely sever ties of everything I was doing and share what I discovered with other people. And it was a call. I felt it was calling out of Isaiah 61, which is a scripture to leave your farms and vineyards and go off and do the work of the Lord, rebuild the things that are broken, and take those that are broken and rise them up from the ashes to become mighty oaks of righteousness, and them to be discipled to do the same for others. And so it was very clear to me that God had called me to do this work. And based on that clarity that I felt God had for me, I came home and told my wife that we were leaving our very high income. We're probably close to $200,000 a year with running a martial arts school and fighting and all those things. We were going to walk away from everything. We were going to liquidate everything we owned, and we were going to go forth and just pay this forward and start serving others. And I told her about Isaiah 61, and she said, "Okay, we're going to call it Mighty Oaks." And Kathy's always been the kind of wife that if I was like, "Hey, we're going to rob banks tomorrow," she'd be like, "What do you want for lunch?" Like, so we did that, and everyone thought we were crazy because I had no idea how to run a nonprofit. I had an MBA, but I never been around nonprofit and ministry. Like, oh my gosh, I mean, I was in the midst of an affair 12 months prior. Like, I had no business running a ministry. I had no business doing any of this stuff. We were still broken in our own home, and so I'll be the first to say that we were not qualified, had no business doing it, but God called us to, and I had to be obedient. And so I decided to walk away from everything we owned. And everyone thought we were crazy. I didn't know how we were going to buy groceries, much less fund a veteran program. But I always knew from the beginning that a veteran would never pay a penny to come to anything that we've built, and that's never happened. And with the very first year, it was really hard. I think it was a test of our faith to see if we were going to stand on that water with nothing under our feet, and just believe that we weren't going to sink. And so that first year was, and I also believe that first year was when not a lot happened, was a year for us to unplug from the busyness of everything. And finally heal as a family. But after that year, God injected a surge of things into the organization that I can never take credit for because I'm not that smart or that capable. But he just brought in people of all caliber and talents and skill sets to build the most incredible organization. I mean, we have 65 employees in only 10 years. We've served hundreds of thousands of warriors. We run about $3.5 million a year operation, all that comes in donations from just an incredible, grateful nation. And of the 150,000 warriors that we've served in active duty and the 4,000 graduates we had from our intensive program, no warrior has ever paid to come, including travel. We cover all flights, everything. And again, that's something that I just cannot take credit for. It's just the incredible provision of God that's made it happen. And so, yeah, to answer your question, how it all happened, I can't honestly answer it, but it's been absolutely incredible. I've learned so much and have the most amazing team that make it possible. We just hired this week a chief operating officer and a national development director of development to come on our team to executive level positions. And every time we make a hire, we get the most incredible talent and people that are just full of passion to serve our warriors and just love God and want to build the kingdom. It's just amazing to be part of. I pinch myself, and I don't feel qualified to work with the people I work with. It's just incredible.
Well, that's a sign of a good leader, if you ask me. Awesome stuff there, man. So, how long have you been doing it now? How many years?
10 years. We started, with 2010 when Kathy and I decided to start it. We really kicked it off in 2011. Is when we kicked it off.
So, what's the secret to the longevity of this? I've seen so many nonprofits blow up. A lot of ego gets in the way, particularly when you have special operators who everybody likes to do it. That we're problem solvers. We're very strong-willed. We always want to improve upon things. I've seen a lot of guys, go into programs and try to stand up their own programs, and it just usually ends bad, man. And to see you doing it so well, I was so thoroughly impressed with your event, and and your 10 years going strong, and you appear to be doing amazing things. So what's the key?
Well, I think it's the same key to being successful at running a nonprofit or running a business or life is to realize that kind of secret to life is not about you.
Amen to that.
If I would make the Mighty Oaks Foundation about me, it would be run a lot different. And it would probably have fizzled out in the first year. Everything in my life before has been about me. Everything I've done is about myself. And so this is the first thing I've ever, really put my hand into in my life that I've never made it about myself. It's about others. And reminding myself of that every day, what the mission is. The mission is to provide the best quality of soul reconciliation services that we can provide to our warriors, and we put them first. And when we disagree with how to do things as a leadership team, when we disagree how to do things, the way we resolve that problem is coming to the conclusion of what's best for the mission and the vision and how to accomplish that mission and vision. And so part, surround yourself with people smarter than yourself. I've surrounded myself with some pretty incredible people that could do things that I never could. And I've stayed focused on the things that I do. And as an organization, while I see so many nonprofits fail, is they start off with doing something they're really good at, and then opportunities come to do other things, and they start trickling out, watering down their mission. Stay laser focused on what you're good at. I get opportunities with finances attached to it all the time, saying, hey, if you go off and venture into this and do this too, it'd be really great. You'd be able to help some of your war warriors, and we're going to pay you, the X amount of dollars to do that. And I have to say no. I mean, there's other organizations that do some of these other things really well, and I need to let them do those things. Pride and ego would say, let Mighty Oaks need to do everything. We need to do all the services. We need to just own it all. And but being kingdom minded, being part of a team is bigger than being part of the Mighty Oaks team. It's being part of the team effort of a grateful nation of Americans who want to serve our warriors, and realizing that we do one thing really well, and that's what we need to focus on. And just staying focused to that. Just staying laser focused on the mission. It's really easy to go down rabbit trails.
Right. So as a program, I know you're a faith-based program, but what would you tell, like, what does Mighty Oaks do and how do they do it? I mean, like, I know Higher Ground is another great organization that does things with outdoor activities without faith. I know, ORW is largely based on a lot of things that John Eldridge did. And I know you went to the John Eldridge boot camp. What makes Mighty Oaks different, or how would you describe what you do if someone was interested in going?
The different components I could say is, our resiliency programs would be going to bases and sharing our personal testimony of what it means to be resilient warriors. What does it mean? The military has a spectrum of pillars of resiliency: mind, body, spirit, social. What does it mean to be mentally tough, physically tough, socially connected, and a strong team? But we really help identify that spiritual pillar, which most people are scared to identify or can't really define what its spiritual fitness actually means. What does it mean to have a spiritual strength? And so we do a lot of that kind of stuff on the resiliency side. But to really answer your question, I want to focus on our core program, which is our legacy program, our recovery program. And so what we do is it is non-clinical and it is faith-based. It's peer-to-peer mentorship. So about 50% of the people that come to Mighty Oaks legacy program are not Christians. They're not Christians coming to a Christian program. They're those who are struggling with either taking their life, with PTSD, with problems in their family. Maybe they're getting in trouble on active duty and their commander said, hey, you need to go, or we're going to drop the hammer on you, or their wife says, I'm going to leave you, or their mom says, I'm going to kick you out of the basement. Like, whatever the problem they're having in their life, like, we believe that there is a biblical solution to that problem, whether they are Christians or not. And so they come to the program, they get put in teams, and their team leader will be someone who's been to the program. So and they don't have to be a combat veteran to go to the program, but to be a team leader and be an instructor, you have to be a combat veteran, because we don't want the combat veterans to disqualify them. Yep. And so they come. So their team leader has been someone that has been to the program, but they're combat veterans who came home, struggled, fell on their face, but they got back up again. And we put them through a discipleship process and train them in our methodology. And that methodology that we take them through, and they're a 6-man team that week, and we will have like 5 or 6 teams. So so we have usually about 40 people inside at a camp. And for a week, they go through this where they get a class, and the class is given through personal testimony. We believe in the power of personal testimony. The enemy has a plan to overtake the world, and God's plan to restore the world is through the blood of the Lamb, through the salvation with Christ, and through the power of our testimony, our personal testimonies of how we overcame the things that the enemy tried to take away from us. And so that's what we teach each class. So we have 14 core classes. Let's say we have a class on character. We'll talk about character. People will talk about their flawed character, their testimony of things they struggle with, and they'll give the biblical perspective of what character looks like. And we have the guys go through a process of contrasting their life to living life the way they were trying to live it, and making decisions based on their own accord. To what if you lived your life this way and aligned your life and calibrated your life to this biblical context, what character looks like? How would your life look differently? And have them come to their own conclusions on that. and then help them navigate to make changes and have a plan. We work through this thing called a fight plan moving forward, and have a plan of how to move forward and how to navigate struggles in life moving forward, and then build accountability and team and network that they can lean on moving forward. And we've just had a tremendous amount of success with that methodology. The most accurate, if you go to the VA for clinical psychology, you're probably going to get cognitive therapy, and there's also a very small amount of clinical counselors at the VA that would do what's called prolonged exposure. So cognitive therapy would look back at your past and say what made that incident. Let's look at that incident, a specific incident, and try to figure it out. Why'd you feel this way? Prolonged exposure would say, let's talk about the mistakes you made, and let's look forward to the future, how you can live differently moving forward based on making adjustments to your life. So our methodology would be more in line with prolonged exposure with a biblical context to it.
And I love that. I love, one of my primary beefs with the church today is there's so many cowardly pastors out there who don't use the Bible for today's problems, right? They put out these year-long plans and they talk about their rainbows and their unicorns and the happy Jesus, and they don't wade into using biblical teachings to solve today's challenges. And we need them to lead so bad right now. I mean, at least I believe that,
and not many more right now.
No.
I'm pretty, especially this week. This week's been a week that I've been very disappointed in a lot of community leaders and pastors that are community leaders.
Yeah, I mean, you might think I'm crazy, but I was down in Charlottesville, Virginia, is where I just moved up to Bangor, Maine, and you're not going to believe why I moved up here. I was down in Charlottesville, Virginia, and I was looking at moving either to Boone, North Carolina, because I couldn't stand the heat in Charlottesville. I wanted to get up at altitude in the mountains, And, those mountains in North Carolina are really nice. I was also looking at the mountains just outside of Greenville, South Carolina, which is another great place where a lot of team guys go to. And one of my friends who watches our podcast is like, hey, man, you need to check out Ken Graves from Calvary Chapel. And I watched him speak, dude. He's the most fearless preacher I've ever seen in my life. I dropped everything. I said, we moved to Bangor. I went to my wife. I showed her. She's like, we're moving to Bangor, aren't we? I'm like, yeah, terrible for business. I mean, I run an active shooter, workplace violence, emergency preparedness company, right? That's what we do for businesses. Everything from pandemic planning, tornadoes, hurricanes, as well as our specialties, workplace violence. And, Maine statistically is the safest state in the union. So it's not like business is blowing down my door. But I felt so called to come and learn at this man's feet. And he is just the most fearless preacher. He calls it like he sees it. And, I was just blown away by it. I'm so glad I did.
I'm kind of lifelong Calvary, not say lifelong, like in my Christian life, Calvary Chapel. I speak at a lot of churches and partners with a lot of churches, but Calvary's been me and my family's kind of network of churches.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I didn't. I was an atheist for 37 years, and then started my journey with a book called "I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist." I had a cancer scare and all that stuff, and still, I decided I was going to party like a rock star and continue doing destructive behavior. That book came into my life, and I'm like, it does take more faith to believe this is all accident than not, because I consider myself a scientist, right? And then migrated my way into faith and was saved, and everything's been, it's been an amazing wild ride since then, man. It's been great.
You listen to Bodhi Bacham? Are you a fan of Bodhi?
No, I've never heard of Bodhi Bacham.
Oh, Bodhi Bacham, Bodhi with a V.
Okay.
Incredible sermon. He's one of the most real and pragmatic apologetics teacher in Christianity.
Great. I mean, I was so sad to see Ravi Zacharias leave us, man. I mean, that guy was one of my go-tos forever.
So there's a message Bodhi does on why I choose to believe the Bible, and definitely challenge all your listeners to listen to Bodhi's message on that. It's one of the best.
Will do.
On why we believe the Bible over everything else.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So let's get into, we started off a little bit earlier with the State of the Union. When you look at the U.S. today, what is your opinion of the State of the Union right now?
It's burning down, man. It's and it's, I mean, really, like, it's been a couple of times I've actually had to, just say it, like hold back tears, because it's just it is just tragic where it is, and what angers me is that this is not accidental, and it's not by the people. It's by political players who continue to orchestrate this, and I think people know that now. I don't even think that's conspiracy. Like, I don't think I'm speaking
No,
conspiracy talk.
that's fact. And
Yeah,
there's foreign governments involved too. Just like, I mean, we destabilized Russia, we destabilized them in Iran by working with dissidents, and they're doing the same darn thing here. And that's what kills me. Like when Mattis comes out, doesn't he realize that he's aiding and abetting our enemies by undermining the president right now? Like,
I mean, he has to. He's a smart guy. I know him. I used to work for him, and I had asked like if I would defend him, and I'm like, no, like this is what he did was wrong. I mean, he accused the president of being a divider, and I mean he didn't. His article was so divisive, and it wasn't based on anything true. It was completely opinion piece, and a person that's in a position like him should never put an opinion piece out like that,
no, it was just,
especially in a fragile time that our country's in right now. He could say he's not a politician, but he is a politician, a proxy of who he is. And it was wrong for him to do. And I love Colin Powell. Colin Powell did the same thing during the Obama administration.
McRaven did the same thing. I mean, all of them are part of this. I'm starting to believe, and I didn't see it before. I haven't been a big fan of officers my whole life, but I'm starting to believe that the DOD, the upper ranks of the DOD, when you work for 50 years, you become part of the deep state, and you got to be, because how many presidents did he work for? you know, there's a lot of different hooks that get into you there doing that, and it just broke my heart to see it because
It really did. It made me sad. I reached out to a couple of mentors of mine, and they said, "Yeah, welcome to TC."
yeah.
And, like I said, he was a hero to me. I worked for him when he was regimental commander by recon platoon.
Well, that's right, because you're a Marine. I know guys who, straight from God's ear to Mattis's mouth to them. That's how they went, and it was, there was some really good, I saw a really good article or paper written by a Marine on Facebook that was going around that I'm going to die a Marine. And it was pretty critical of the Mattis thing. I don't know. You probably saw it. It made its way
So yeah,
around every.
Marine Colonel who's highly respected man too.
Yeah. And, I thought it was very well done. And it just made me so sad because all those guys could have been uniters. They all could have served our country more just by saying, hey, these are trying times. Let's support our president and get behind. Instead, they go out and do that, and they just make it so much worse. They just helped Iran. They just helped China. They just helped Russia by destabilizing our country a little bit more. And it just, for guys like you and I and for all the veterans out there who love this country more, like it's, more than almost anything, it's just, it's sad. It feels like a knife in the back.
Yeah, I mean it empowers something like that empowers these antagonists and at this point terrorists it provokes them to continue doing what they're doing because they feel like they're winning. And
Yeah, and I'm a huge Trump supporter, but Kerry Jackson, who's another SEAL, put out a really good, put out a post on social media saying that this was a missed opportunity. Trump's a counterpuncher. I love him for it, but sometimes I wish he'd just be the bigger guy and he could have, just used this to say, hey, Mattis has got his, here's my plan and whatever. But that's not him. He's a flawed man doing God's work, I believe, right now. And I think if it wasn't for him, holy smokes.
Oh yeah, if it wasn't for him and this administration right now, we would not have a country anymore.
Yeah.
Hillary Clinton administration would have. I don't think we would have recovered. I think God knew that, and God spared us a little longer.
Well, I mean, evangelicals have saved this country, over and over again, and I just hope they rise to the occasion again in November, and that we're able to move forward and get to the bottom of a lot of things that I think we can do in the next administration, in the next 4 years of the Trump administration, which I believe they're going to win.
Yeah, in the campaign, speaking to veterans and speaking at some of the rallies and stuff like that, really just, it's really easy for me because I can speak directly on policy, and I can tell you that this administration has signed executive orders and created policy that allows me to do the work that we do at Mighty Oaks and a Biden administration. I already know what happened because it was a Biden Obama administration that made it really difficult for us to do our work before.
Right.
So,
So let's pivot and talk about running a nonprofit. I don't know how much time you got left, but I just wanted to, okay. Um, and cover, running a nonprofit when, I mean, we're in a roaring economy and, I saw more nonprofits forming every other day because, people would rather donate to nonprofits than pay taxes, right? I mean, that's the key of it. You get to choose your thing. So, how are you guys adjusting and dealing with that?
well, I mean, we the biggest adjustment for us was access. I mean, it's always having the ability to serve. So the COVID thing for us, we had we had programs scheduled. We're doing 30 programs a year, and then I'm going to base at least 2 to 4 bases a month, and so all those programs are immediately canceled over COVID.
Yeah.
And so I mean, we had 4 ranches: California, Virginia, Ohio, and Texas. In all 4 states had restrictions on gatherings more than any kind of gatherings, but especially gatherings more than 10. And so our programs have been stopped up until last week. Last week we had our first one back, and then we're on a second one back right now. And even so, they're still limited on the number of people that we could have. And I'll be the first to say, like, one, I think the numbers were exaggerated. I think they took a strand of the flu and made a manufactured pandemic over it. Which, again, I'm not saying. I think the administration did the right thing. I think we were cautious. The president made the right calls, but really quickly we've seen the numbers were wrong, and I think America was playing along and being good support. I think every American was like, okay, we have to wait and see what happens. Let's be safe. And then we realized really quickly, and the president said it best: the solution can't be worse than the problem itself.
Yeah.
And where that affected a lot of business owners and people like that, but I could say where it affected me at Mighty Oaks is our ability to serve these guys that are literally in life or death situations.
Now they're isolated even more.
Isolated. We tell everyone that if you're suffering with depression, anxiety, suicide ideations, don't isolate. And then now we're telling them isolate. Programs like Mighty Oaks couldn't function. The VA shifted from no more mental health meetings on base or VA facilities, no more one-on-one mental health meetings. They have to meet over the phone. And I know of several, and of course I'm in the community, so it would come to me. But I know of several people that were in clinical care and senior caretakers weren't able to see their caretakers anymore, and they've taken their life in the last 8 weeks. And
Yeah,
so I mean, it had terrible results. And if anything was essential over liquor stores or Planned Parenthood or Walmart or Home Depot, if anything was essential, it should be our most vulnerable, which are mental health people. These veterans, the veterans that come to Mighty Oaks, they don't care if they catch the flu or catch the cold or COVID or whatever. They care about not sticking a pistol in their mouth and killing themselves. And they should have the right to be able to make the choice to go to a program like Mighty Oaks and get the help they need. So we're still fighting. And on the donation side, I mean, the economy was impacted. This was a opportunity for political players to take advantage of this virus to make a strategic strike on our economy for no other reason than to impact Donald Trump in the election.
I believe that.
And I mean, it's going to hurt a lot of people in the economy. It's going to hurt organizations like Mighty Oaks who depend on the extra income that people make to donate to make it possible for us to do programs that we do. I mean, it's going to impact us. I mean, because the economy will bounce back, but we're going to see a slump for a while in giving. And we already see, some weekly giving. We see a voluntary weekly giving, and we see a decline. I think for the most part, Americans really believe the people that support Mighty Oaks really are loyal donors, and they probably really want to continue to support as much as they can. So I'm thankful for that. But I do believe we're going to see a pretty big impact.
I just want to say, to have, the veterans, they don't know they need someone fighting for them a lot. And you really are, the best of us out there fighting for, the veterans, because, I've seen so many guys rode hard and put away wet, doing deployment after deployment after deployment after deployment after deployment. And there's nothing left. Their daughter's a stripper. They're on their 5th marriage. And then they end up, killing themselves. And I've lost so many friends that way. And to get a chance to talk to a guy like you who's making not just a ripple, you are making a massive impact on the veteran community. And now you're doing it, for first responders as well. And I just want to salute you and say that, I think you're an amazing individual, and I want to thank you and praise, God for you for what you do.
Man, I really appreciate that. Thank you. I couldn't do it without these amazing people that are around me every day, and just an incredible support of a grateful nation. So.
All right. So is there any, I want to give you, as much time as you want to plug your organization now and ask on people how they can support you, because I really appreciate your time, brother.
No, definitely. If any first of all, if any veterans or active duty or family members, we also take care of spouses or first responders need the services that I talked about at Mighty Oaks. Again, they're all free. Just go to mightyoaksprograms.org and you get information on the website. You can apply on the website, and we'll definitely take care of you and get you back to being back in the fight. And if anybody listening would like to partner or be help us support, I say all these programs are free. They're actually not free; they're just free to the veterans, and so we really rely on support from that. So if anybody wants to chip in and support, buy any of our books, anything like that, then definitely hop on our website, same website, mightyoaksprograms.org, and we definitely appreciate your support. So thankful for it.
All right. Well, thank you so much, brother. God bless you. God bless everyone who works for your amazing organization. God bless America.
Thanks, man. God bless.
All right. All right. Remember to like and comment below this video and subscribe to my channel for more great videos on coronavirus updates and how to protect yourself and your loved ones.